thanks so much for joining us and talking about the Angel Court project. This is an existing building, or started with an existing 1970s building. Why did you decide to keep that instead of tearing it down and building anew?
Well, it was very much born out of circumstances for the development itself and its position. The building was located within a strategically important conservation area within London. Part of the planning condition requirements were safeguarding that conservation area. The city planners wouldn't let us demolish the existing core and take it back down to ground and build it back up to its original heights, because they didn't want to set a precedent for doing the very same thing and creating an intensive area of high-rise construction in the conservation area. So it was primarily a challenge that we had to deal with as a development. It did create some positives. We had a fantastic sustainability story. So keeping the existing concrete core, although having engineering challenges to keep it stable during the demolition and construction of the superstructure, it did save us approximately 28,000 tonnes of concrete being imported to site. And it also saved us significant time on the programme for the superstructure as well. So all in all, although we had that challenge as a development, it's something that we can look back on as a positive story for the development.
Does seem like a challenge to deal with a 1970s building, though. I mean, were there any difficulties there with adapting that and making it still feel modern?
Well, retaining the core, the servicing of the previous building, the 1970s building, was quite different to what we were proposing at Angel Court. So we went through a really thorough exercise in coordinating the structure and the new building services before we started making any amendments to the building. So the old building had attributes that didn't quite work for the modern building, the modern workplace, and what current occupiers will be looking for.
Like what?
Particularly the ground floor, the public realm, and the external approach to the building. So actually you arrived at the building by crossing a service road before you got into the lobby of the existing building. So we worked very hard to fully pedestrianise the whole of Angel Court and create two grand new office entrances directly from the public realm level. And then as you made your way up through the building, the floor-to-ceiling heights in certain areas of the building were lower than what we might expect or need for a bigger building. So at the lower levels of the building, we had floor-to-ceiling heights of 2.6 metres. But we were making the floors there much broader, much bigger. So we wanted to raise the floor-to-ceiling to about 3 metres to get enough daylight into the spaces. So it had a few inherent issues that we had to design out.
So were you able to raise the ceilings then?
We did. We raised them on all of the lower levels. And then up through in the tower, it was less of an issue really, because the tower had a relatively shallow window to core dimension in the existing building. So the floor to ceilings there were 2.6 metres. That was quite a comfortable ratio for the 7.5 metre depth of floor plate. But we increased the girth of the tower by 3 metres. So therefore we designed a new sandwich, structural and servicing sandwich, to slim down the floor and gain an additional 100 millimetres to support the extra width that we were getting on the floor.
So this building is not any taller than the original building, but it's a lot bigger, essentially, and there's more public space. So does it still have any connection to the historic structure that was there when you got there? Was there anything you kept and accentuated, or does it feel like a whole new building?
No, it feels like a completely new building. And that was very much the intention. The old building, the character of the old building was a dark and relatively uninviting building. The glazing units were heavily smoked to control solar gains, and that carried right the way down to the ground floor level. And it was actually clad in pink Dakota granite, come all the way from the US to London. But that material, again, it was a very dark environment right down at ground floor. So we were keen to completely change the perception of that quarter of the city. And therefore, there's no real relation to any of the historic building other than retaining that core.
Is this something that could be done to other buildings from this era? Because it's a big problem or challenge, I guess, for a lot of architects in cities, outside of London, where you've got tons of buildings from this era that are reaching the age where they're probably going to get demolished. Like you say, there's a huge sustainability advantage to keeping them around. So are there lessons from how you guys adapted this building for the modern era that could be applied elsewhere, or was it a unique situation?
Of course, and I think definitely in this time of an ever-tightening grip on resource, reuse is a big part of what people are going to need to do in the future. There's definite lessons learned to be shared. It's an engineering challenge, but we've shown that it is possible. And this property stock within London, a high proportion of those existing buildings have similar construction, so it will be done again, probably in a not too distant future.
I understand the garden floor and the sky floor apartments. The garden floor ones, the lower ones, have actually been leased faster than the penthouses. Is that just a function of price, or what's going on there?
So there was a couple of things that are going on there. Undoubtedly, there was a big draw with the terraces and the external spaces that were created to the lower floors. And that was all about complementing the tower, which had these 360-degree views across London. Big open spaces, tenants are drawn to those spaces. Although it's a workplace, there's a definite focus now on creating well-being for people at work, making sure they've got spaces that they can go and relax in, take some downtime, and just some consideration time. For us, there was also a strategy that we wanted to let the lower floors first. They were the larger floor plates. We wanted to show some life within Angel Court as well, enliven the area. So those particular floors were pushed forward. And fortunately, given the economic climate, that people came in, they liked what they saw and they took the space. And the tower floors were actually held back because we knew, everybody enjoys a view out. And we knew there would be a lot of interest. So although they've gone later, we're still 100% confident that the whole building is going to go very shortly.
Mm-hmm. Stepping back from Angel Court, are there other projects at the Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitats Awards ceremony this year that are exciting or interesting, inspiring to you? Have you gotten the chance to look at some of the other finalists in the various categories?
There's an overview in the documentation, but personally I'm excited to see the people involved in the projects present them and to understand a bit more of the detail about them. I wouldn't pick out any specifically. I'm interested in Southeast Asia and what's going on there. So yeah, we'll see what the conference has in store.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the Asia category, there's a high proportion of buildings there that are, super tall, and it's amazing the amount of engineering gymnastics that people have to get through to be able to make those buildings work. But it's understanding the stories of each of those buildings, because some of them, although they're not as tall, have got very interesting concepts and stories behind how and why they came to life. So it should be a good couple of days.
What does the phrase smart tall building mean to you each?
For me, that means a fully connected building, and actually it means comes right down to the user, to the individual, and the individual understanding their place in the building, and the level of control that they can have over their working environment, and about everything being connected to support the individual in the building. That's what it means to me.
Smart tall buildings for me are buildings that aren't just there to deliver office space. I think they're giving something back. The tall buildings create landmarks, but they become buildings that sometimes take over the landscape, and it's important that although they're tall, they also fit in with their surroundings as well. So it's that dynamic of making sure you're delivering some usable space, but it's smart in the sense that it delivers space that people can use and enjoy, and also fit in with its surroundings.
Do you think a building can be both iconic and contextually appropriate at the same time? How should tall buildings fit into their existing urban environments?
That's an interesting question, and it's something we'll actually cover in our presentation later this afternoon. It was the aspiration with Angel Court, for example, that it doesn't shout, and it doesn't say, "Look at me," and it's a subtler approach to the aesthetic and the design. But that doesn't mean it can't be an icon. I think the understanding of what an icon is different for different people. Angel Court will hopefully be iconic for the creative way that we've approached the very difficult task that we had in that particular part of the city. And of course, icon for others may mean something that stands out and shouts. So I think it's definitely depends who you ask.
Nick?
I'm with Nick. I think it's about the context of where the building is. A building can be iconic on the basis that people can appreciate its form and that it fits in. And I'd hope with all of our future buildings that they may not be super tall or taking over the landscape, but they're iconic in the sense that they create great workspaces and great residences. And people enjoyed being in them and also appreciating them aesthetically as well.